Hi guys, Olive here today to talk to you about the 2023 season for nonfiction book prizes. You've probably heard of some of the big fiction book prizes out there, but did you know there are also prizes that celebrate nonfiction? I actually made a video a couple of years ago talking about all the nonfiction book prizes that I follow. I will link that video for you below and up in the cards if you haven't seen it. But in today's video, I thought we could go through the 2023 season. We could see which books became finalists for all the prizes that I follow, which books ended up winning, and which of those I'm personally interested in reading. We are going to start with the Baillie Gifford Prize for nonfiction. This is actually one of my favorite prizes to follow, and I was waiting for the winner to be announced before I made this video. The winner was just announced a few days ago. So I'm going to be looking down at my laptop here. The shortlisted titles this year were Time to Think, The Inside Story of the Collapse of the Tavistock's Gender Service for Children by Hannah Barnes. Red Memory, Living, Remembering, and Forgetting China's Cultural Revolution by Tanya Branigan. Revolutionary Spring, Fighting for a New World, 1848 to 1849 by Christopher Clark. Time's Echo, The Second World War, the Holocaust, and the Music of Remembrance by Jeremy Eichler. Mr. B, George Balanchine's 20th Century by Jennifer Homans, and Fireweather, A True Story from a Hotter World by John Valiant. As always, these shortlisted titles are very diverse in their subject matter. They're very topical. Some really interesting ones on the shortlist this year. I would say of all of these, the one that interests me the most is Fireweather, which is the story of a wildfire that happened in Canada back in 2016, and the author talks about what all that specific tragedy indicates about climate change. I'm definitely very interested to read it, especially because I read John Valiant's other book called The Tiger. It was one of the most nail-biting works of nonfiction that I've ever read. So I already know he can write. But I'm especially excited to read Fireweather now because it won the Baillie Gifford Prize for 2023. I wouldn't recommend watching the awards ceremony if you find it here on YouTube. I was watching it live at the time. This author, when he was accepting the award, gave a very cringeworthy speech. It's just kind of more proof that if you are nominated for something, even if you think there is zero chance of you winning, please still prepare a speech. If you don't and you go off the cuff, things can go wrong. And I think that's what happened here. But I'm sure the book is good. Like I said, I already know he can write. He's now won the Baillie Gifford. They select really great books. So I'm really excited for this. But speaking of award ceremonies, I also watched the one for the National Book Award, which I have to say had some streaming issues and it ran a little bit long. I tend to go to bed really early because I wake up in the wee hours of the morning, not by choice. I just have a lot of trouble sleeping. So I was ready to go to bed, but I stayed up because I wanted to see which book won the nonfiction category. And I'm glad I tuned in early because Oprah gave the most beautiful speech about books, about literacy, about banning books, and why it's bad. She just has such a commanding presence. Like if she had stood up there and given an hour-long lecture, I would have been eating up every last word during every minute of that speech. Eventually, though, they did get around to the nonfiction section. Not a moment too soon. I was ready for bed. The finalists this year were Liliana's Invincible Summer, A Sister's Search for Justice by Cristina Rivera Garza. The Rediscovery of America, Native Peoples and the Unmaking of U.S. History by Ned Blackhawk. Ordinary Notes by Christina Sharp. We Could Have Been Friends, My Father and I, a Palestinian memoir by Raja Shahadi, and Fireweather, A True Story from a Hotter World by John Valiant. Fireweather was nominated for the National Book Award too, which just makes me all the more interested to read it, but I am definitely also interested to read Liliana's Invincible Summer, which is about how this author started looking into the murder of her younger sister. The synopsis reminded me a lot of Memorial Drive by Natasha Trethewey, and if I end up reading Liliana's Invincible Summer, which I had never even heard of before seeing it was nominated, if I like that book even half as much as I like Memorial Drive, then I will love it. The book that won the 2023 National Book Award for Nonfiction is The Rediscovery of America, and this one sounds amazing as well. From what I read about this one, apparently it's a look at early American history, but from the perspective of Indigenous people. And being someone who went through the American education system, I can tell you that there is a narrative that they push to us, but it doesn't take very long once you're out of school, if you are in fact paying attention, to realize it's not the entire truth. And I'm sure this book would give me a lot to think about. But then there's also the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction, an award named for Pittsburgh's own Andrew Carnegie, a far from perfect man who nonetheless did a lot for libraries, not the least of which is my own library system here in Pittsburgh. There were only 3 finalists for this medal. They were Constructing a Nervous System by Margot Jefferson, An Immense World, How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us by Ed Yong, and Vagina Obscura, An Anatomical Voyage by Rachel E. Gross. This is such an interesting shortlist. All 3 of these books are definitely my kind of thing. I was especially excited to see that Constructing a Nervous System was one of the finalists. That was a book that I felt positive was going to be on the Bailey Gifford shortlist last year, or at least be nominated for it. It seems so unique and thought-provoking. It just seemed like their kind of book. And then it wasn't even up for the award. So I'm glad that at the very least, the Andrew Carnegie Medal is honoring it. But the winner of the 2023 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction went to a book that I have actually read, An Immense World by Ed Yong. This book is so fantastic. I did not read the other 2 finalists. I'm sure those are great as well, and I would really like to read those. But I can tell you that Ed Yong's book is outstanding. I want it to win everything. I want to put it in everybody's hands. I want to reread it approximately 15 more times. I love this book. I think it deserves all of the recognition that it's getting. It really warms my heart that a book that is probably going to be my favorite book of this year is getting its flowers elsewhere as well. And I got to feel that same warm and fuzzy feeling all over again when the BookTube Prize results came out. This year, The Escape Artist, The Man Who Broke Out of Auschwitz to Warn the World by Jonathan Freedland took the bronze medal. Paradise Falls, The True Story of an Environmental Catastrophe by Keith O'Brien took silver. And then An Immense World by Ed Yong took the gold. It was such a wonderful surprise to see An Immense World take the gold for the BookTube Prize. I am just so excited that my fellow booktubers read it and loved it as much as I did, loved it enough to push it to the very, very top where it belongs, because it really, really is that good. These other 2, I've seen their covers around, so I recognize them, but I don't know much about them. I've not been as good in 2023 about keeping up with new releases as I have been in previous years. But of these 2, I could definitely see myself reading Paradise Falls, which I guess wouldn't come as a surprise since it's about the environment. The last 3 prizes I'm going to speak about in this video all focus on one specific subgenre of nonfiction. Up to this point, I've talked about nonfiction book prizes that consider all the subgenres of nonfiction, so those shortlists have a good mix of different types of nonfiction, versus these ones, they only consider that one type of nonfiction. They're definitely more specialized, and my favorite of that kind is definitely the Wainwright Prize for nature writing, since nature writing is probably my favorite subgenre of nonfiction. But for this year, the shortlisted titles were A Line in the World, A Year on the North Sea Coast by Dordan Noors, The Golden Mole and Other Living Treasure by Catherine Rundell, 10 Birds That Changed the World by Stephen Moss, 12 Words for Moss by Elizabeth Jane Burnett, Belonging, Natural Histories of Place, Identity, and Home by Amanda Thompson, and The Flow, Rivers, Water, and Wildness by Amy Jane Beer. Honest to God, this entire shortlist is going on my TBR. This is why the Wainwright Prize is probably my favorite, more specialized nonfiction book prize, even though it is absolutely toxic for the health of my TBR, because I want to read every single book they recognize. Like 12 Words for Moss, for instance. That one seems like it would be an amazing read after finishing Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which I also loved. Being a bird nerd, of course, 10 Birds That Changed the World is directly up my alley. But I do have to take a quick moment to poke a little bit of fun at the title. Back when I first started this channel, I made this video about my bookish pet peeves. And one of those was this insistence that nonfiction publishers have to include the words change the world in the titles of their books. Like they have to tell us that something changed the world in order for us to care enough to read it. Like they don't have faith that we want to read it if we didn't believe that it would change the world. And I know my point in that video was that everything that exists in the world has technically changed the world. Like if these 10 birds didn't exist, it would technically be a different world. If you understand what I mean by that, I just really don't like that tendency. Publishers also really like to include in the subtitles of books things along the lines of why dolphins jump and what it says about us. What could it possibly say about us? And why does it need to say anything about us? But these are just pet peeves about the way that publishers name titles. I am sure that this author didn't have much of a say in the title of this book, and I'm sure the book itself is fantastic. So I will definitely be reading that. The winner of the 2023 Wainwright Prize for Nature Writing was The Flow. And I have to read you the synopsis for this one because it is so beautiful, and I don't know if I can do it justice. It reads, a visit to the rapid where she lost a cherished friend unexpectedly reignites Amy Jane Beer's love of rivers, setting her on a journey of discovery. Threading together places and voices from across Britain, The Flow is a profound, immersive exploration of our personal and ecological place in nature. That sounds so poignant and so heartfelt. I could definitely see myself picking this one up too. This entire shortlist was just a gold mine, as it normally is. The Cundill History Prize is one that I've started following in more recent years, and it obviously awards excellence in history books. There were 3 finalists this year, which are Red Memory, Living, Remembering, and Forgetting China's Cultural Revolution by Tanya Branigan, which you may remember since it was also nominated for the Baillie Gifford. Queens of a Fallen World, The Lost Women of Augustine's Confessions by Kate Coops, and Charged, A History of Batteries and Lessons for a Clean Energy Future by James Morton Turner. The book on batteries sounds really intriguing. I would definitely read it. I remember Bill Gates talked about the need for better batteries in his book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which I actually reviewed here on my channel. But a book on the history of batteries, making it to the finals of this kind of a prize, it must be really good. What's interesting about highlighting all of these different nonfiction book prizes here in this one video is that you get the chance to see the overlap. You get to see which nonfiction books were spectacular enough to get recognized by multiple different prizes. And one of those was Red Memory. Like I said, it was shortlisted for the Baillie Gifford, except it actually won the Cundill History Prize. And the press release says that it is a haunting excavation of the Cultural Revolution, uncovering 40 years of silence following countless hours of interviews. Branigan's Red Memory gives voices to those who lived through Mao's decade of madness. That sounds extremely powerful. I am not surprised at all it won. The final prize I wanted to mention in this video is the Pushkin House Book Prize, which always recognizes works on Russia or Eastern Europe. They tend to be history books or foreign policy books. The shortlisted titles in 2023 were Muppets in Moscow, The Unexpected Crazy True Story of Making Sesame Street in Russia by Natasha Lance Rogoff, Overreach, The Inside Story of Putin's War Against Ukraine by Owen Matthews, Russia's War by Jade McGlynn, Places of Tenderness and Heat by Olga Petri, Cigarettes and Soviets, Smoking in the USSR by Tricia Starks, and Red Leviathan, The Secret History of Soviet Whaling by Ryan Tucker-Jones. This is such an interesting batch of titles on the short list. So many different topics are represented here. There are very, very niche books, and then there are books that I think anyone could pick up and read. And I am so happy that Muppets in Moscow was nominated. It was one of my most anticipated releases of late last year. I still really need to read it. I just haven't had time, but I'm going to. And seeing it on this short list made me so happy. But the winner of the prize this year is another one that I really need to read, Overreach by Owen Matthews. And apparently in this book, he discusses the history behind the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And also he talks about how the first 6 months of the war unfolded. This one is very topical. It's very important. And since it won, I'm sure it's well written as well. So that was my pretty broad overview of the 2023 Nonfiction Book Prize season. Again, if you want any more information about the book prizes themselves, if you want to know the history behind them, if you want to know what they look for, what the winners actually receive, please do check out that video I made about the prizes themselves. That'll be linked for you in the description box below. But I would love to hear from you. Do you follow any of these nonfiction book prizes? Did any of the nominated titles catch your attention? Do you have any opinions about the winners? I'd love to hear any or all of that down in the comment section below. In the description box below, you will see all of these prizes and the books I mentioned listed out and linked for your clicking convenience. And at the bottom of that exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets, like Goodreads, Instagram, the Storygraph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I'm reading and doing right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.